there's nothing especially new about environmental studies. Many schools, both primary and secondary, have been doing them for years, often in very great detail. Practical projects of this kind, with their emphasis on real things and the real world, real people, are thought to be particularly useful for the less academic child. They help to make the transition between the world of school and the world outside a gradual instead of a sudden one. But surely the academic children too have to make this kind of adjustment, and we should give this experience to all children if we can. We're going through a period of very great change in secondary education, when a lot of thought is being given to such things as organisation and curriculum reform. Many educationalists feel that within this changing pattern, we ought to create opportunities for all children to explore the world outside the school and to learn from it. In this series, we hope to show you some environmental studies from schools in different parts of the country. In the final programme, a group of people who are concerned with the educational issues will be discussing the methods that we have seen and making suggestions for future possibilities. This school is a boys' school in Southampton. It's a very new school, as you see, and the headmaster is Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams, how would you describe your school?
It's a new school built in 1960 and caters in the main for 2 large housing estates. It comprises of 475 boys, a 4-form entry. 50% of these boys at least stay on for a 5-year course, which leads to GCE or CSE, the remainder for a 4-year general study course.
I see. And of course Southampton is an excellent centre for field studies of all kinds.
Oh, it's admirably suited indeed, especially for the geographical aspect of environmental studies. Mr. Carey, the geography master and master in charge of field studies, he always has some project or other underway. I suppose situated as we are, the obvious choice, one of the obvious choices anyway, is the study of the Hampshire Basin. But I would also make the point that the environmental studies, and geography in particular, is not just an extra tacked on for fun, but is a real part of the curriculum. And this applies too to our journeys overseas as well as locally.
Yes, I see.
Vesuvius is one of the great volcanoes of Western Europe. Here we are in the crater, going down, down, down. The crater is perhaps 500 feet deep and as much as half a mile across. We're walking along the very sharp crater edge, very steep, very dangerous, and going down the one possible path into the crater where you can see some whiffs of steam, the only evidence of present activity.
Excuse us interrupting, Mr. Carey. May I present Mr. Light?
How do you know, Mr. Light? We were expecting you.
Hello, Mr. Carey. Did I hear something about Vesuvius just then?
Yes, indeed. We made a film there a few years ago, and we're going back to southern Italy again shortly.
And going down the crater?
Perhaps, if it's not interruption.
Well, the project we'd really like to hear about is the one on the Hampshire Basin.
Right, I get one of the boys to explain it to you. John?
The 3 main regions that we are studying are the Isle of Wight around here, and the tertiary basin around Southampton, and the chalk uplands around here.
But I understand you're planning more than just a geographical project.
Yes, we are shooting our own film as a permanent record. The geographical work will be done by my own film, 4B, and the film group are a little bit older, but we all work together on it, and the girls from the neighbouring school join in.
What have you done so far on this survey, John?
Been all the way along the valley here and to Winchester.
The thing about field work is you've got to be prepared for all kinds of weather.
The day we went to Winchester, it rained in torrents. Winchester used to be the capital of England in the time of King Alfred the Great. King Alfred's statue stands on the Broadway at the end of the High Street. It's not a very old statue. It was erected about 65 years ago. Winchester itself is very old. It was a Roman town and lots of remains of Roman houses have been found here. Mr. Carey told us how he helped to excavate one of them, under the corner of what is now the car park. It was a mosaic pavement, and it's now in the Winchester City Museum.
That was Neil speaking. The visit to Winchester was a preliminary survey, but the boys and girls all kept full accounts of what they had found there. John takes up the story.
When the Romans left Britain in the 4th century AD, the Romanised British probably stayed on in Winchester until the Anglo-Saxons came. The Roman buildings were destroyed, and these mosaic pavements were buried under the rubble for 1,500 years. Another interesting exhibit in the museum is this group of objects from a 1st century Roman grave, lent to the museum by Mr. Howard Morgan. The dishes are of red pottery, a kind called Samian ware. They were imported from the continent. These are beads, also some glass counters used for some kind of game. The jug is made of bronze and has a very fine decorated handle.
Museum visiting is bound to find a place in any environmental study of this kind, and a study of local architecture may also be relevant.
This is Great Minster Street. The houses here are very much the same as they were 150 years ago. The most important building in Winchester is, of course, the cathedral. Part of this is Norman, but the west end that we can see from here is perpendicular. We shall be making a detailed study of its architecture later on.
There's a rather amusing tombstone on the green, in memory of Thomas Thatcher, who died of a violent fever contracted by drinking small beer when hot. The 12th of May, 1764, aged 26 years.
This initial survey was to give the class a general idea of the historical background of the area. Meanwhile, the film group, whose members change from year to year, is getting familiar with the equipment. Terry is an ex-pupil of the school. He was a member of the film group, so keen in fact that when he left school he took a special course in photography at the Technical College, and now has a job as assistant photographer in a large Southampton firm. Charles is learning to load the camera. Whenever he can spare the time, Terry comes back to his old school to give some professional help to the present film group. Professional equipment, such as this 16mm camera and a good quality tape recorder, costs money, of course. But when you have Mr. Carey's kind of enthusiasm, ways and means can usually be found.
Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
One of the most rewarding locations in this Hampshire Basin survey is a farm on the chalk uplands in the extreme north of the study area. And this is where the school is bound for today. The boys will be joined en route by a party of girls from a neighbouring school. These two schools frequently share geographical projects of this kind. The journey across the region is a most valuable part of the survey, and the maps that will be used on the way have been produced on a photostat machine by the boys themselves.
The first part of our journey took us through Southampton, which is a large built-up area with a population of 220,000. The town has a large shopping centre which caters for many people, not only in the town but also in the suburbs. The chief importance of the town is as a port which deals in many commodities from cars to fruit, for distribution throughout the country. From Southampton we went to West End, Fair Oak, Colden Common, Twyford, and then to one of our main study areas, which was St. Catherine's Hill. On the journey it was observed that the land use was mainly pasture, which is used for cattle rearing. Also there was some arable and a small amount of market gardening.
Although this is mainly a geographical survey, it is of course impossible to divorce geography from history, and from prehistory. The two schools have already made their first historical study of Winchester, which lies about halfway along today's route. And another area that will be surveyed in more detail is St. Catherine's Hill.
Just before Winchester, we turned off our direct route so that we could get a view over the valley. Down there is Winchester. On the other side of the road is St. Catherine's Hill. Alongside the hill is a dry chalk valley formed during the Ice Age. St. Catherine's Hill has at the summit some old Iron Age earthworks constructed sometime around 300 BC. At about 50 BC, the Iron Age community living on the hill were overrun by the Belgae, the fierce Celtic tribal warriors. Over there, on the other side of the road, you can just see Winchester Cathedral. On this journey, we didn't stop in Winchester. There's King Alfred's statue. The sun's shining on him today, not like the last time we came here.
Well, here we are at Ashley Wallen Farm. This is the first visit here for this particular party. Though Mr. Carey and the farmer, Mr. Christian, are old friends. In fact, Mr. Carey has been visiting the farm with parties from the school for 15 years. From now onwards, the activities of the two groups will diverge somewhat. The younger boys and girls will be working on the survey. Some will concentrate on the farm buildings, others on the livestock, others on land utilization, and the film group will try to record their activities against a general background picture of the whole farm. Every foot of film is expensive, and the value of every shot is carefully weighed up before any filming is done. The group has been given a general idea of the ground they are to cover, but they themselves are responsible for the exact choice of site, length of shot, exposure, and all the technical details. Ashley Wallen Farm is typical of the small mixed farms on the chalk uplands. It is a family concern, and Mr. Christian himself comes from a very long line of farmers, originally in Lincolnshire. Perhaps Mr. Christian has a soft spot for youngsters. At any rate, he is delighted to give them as much information as he can about the running of the farm.
Mr. Christian, I wonder if you could tell me how many acres you have on the farm?
We have 432 acres, of which 150 are arable, about 200 are lays, and the rest is downland for sheep.
What do you mean by lay?
Well, we normally plough a field up after it's been down 3 years and then relay it down after about 4 years. We crop it with barley and then put it down to lay again.
Do you find it it's very hard soil to turn over with a plough?
Oh, no, we use the Ferguson 35s. We pull a 4-4 plough simply enough. Well, the soil is chalk and flints on top like. The flints make it a bit difficult for us to work it because we wear so many ploughshares out.
I suppose that most teachers who undertake surveys of this kind would argue that one of their advantages is that many different subjects of the school curriculum are put to a purpose whose use is apparent to the children themselves. In this case, preparing accurate plans of various farm buildings involves a certain amount of work in applied mathematics. But there are many less tangible ways in which a farm visit particularly can widen a child's horizons. How many town children, for example, have the opportunity of handling real live farm animals? This enrichment of experience is something to which we often pay lip service, but because its value can't be assessed in the same way as an essay or a mathematical exercise, its importance is too often forgotten. In some respects, this is an unusual farm, and one of its main attractions as a study area is the proximity of the Iron Age hill fort on nearby Ladle Hill, begun in the 1st or 2nd century BC. One of the reasons why Mr. Carey takes his class to the top is so that they can get a good view of the surrounding countryside. Ladle Hill Fort, which overlooks the chalk escarpment, was never finished, but the remains demonstrate very clearly how the defences of this kind were planned and built. It was designed to enclose 7 acres of ground within a single oval ditch and bank. The perimeter was marked out as a shallow trench, traces of which still remain, and following this line, the main ditch was begun in separate sections. The turf and topsoil were dumped in huge piles behind the site of the rampart, which was to be faced all round with chalk blocks to prevent the loose soil from slipping back into the ditch. The site had been used before. The line that the class is walking round marks the position of a Bronze Age saucer barrow, and there are other barrows nearby, dating perhaps from about 1500 BC. The fort was a large one, presumably of some importance, but since it was never finished, we can only suppose that the emergency that caused these hasty excavations must soon have been over. We shall probably never know what it was. Field work, of course, is only one part of an ambitious project of this kind. A contour relief map of the whole area is being prepared, and this requires many hours of exacting and rather skillful work. Then there are specimens to be classified, and various other displays to be set up in the classroom. And while Form 4B are getting on with the main project, the film group has begun its work on the editing. This involves new technical skills as well as the exercise of considerable judgment. Valuable tasks for 15-year-old groups. The making of the film, like the project on the Hampshire Basin itself, proceeds in stages, and the preparation of a film commentary forms a useful basis for revision and clarification of important points.
Now, today we are going to write a commentary for the Hampshire Basin film, and we begin by revising the geology of the whole area, the Hampshire Basin, that is, this area. What are the rocks in the area around Southampton made of? Go on, Smithy, you tell me.
The rocks around Southampton are made of sand, gravel and clay.
Yes, fine. They're made of clay, sands and gravel. You tell me, what do we call this whole area?
This area is called the Tertiary Basin.
Can anyone tell me a little bit more about the meaning of the Tertiary Basin?
And so the commentary is written and the film put together. And next we're going to see part of the result. The part we actually watched being filmed on the farm. Let me emphasize that the extract that follows is entirely the work of the school. Filmed on 16mm film with their own cine camera, as the BBC has not altered it or their recorded commentary in any way. The film is not yet finished, but this is one short extract, just as we have received it from the school.
We are looking north from the chalk escarpment over the Vale of Kingsclere. In the far distance, we can see the London Basin. Immediately in front of us is the fertile green sand vale. Behind it, a narrow strip of chalk downland. And beyond that, heath and woodlands, on clays, sands and gravels. If we turn round and look south, down the chalk dip slope, we can see Mr. Christian's farm, Ashley Warren, covering about 432 acres. This is the farm we have come to study. Most of Mr. Christian's 100 head of cattle are eventually sold as beef stock at Salisbury Cattle Market, but he keeps 3 cows for milk for his family. Ashley Warren is a family farm, with Mr. Christian's son and 2 daughters and only 1 farm worker to help him. In addition to the farmhouse, there are barns and outbuildings where Mr. Christian keeps some of his machinery. In the farmhouse where the family lives are all the modern conveniences a town dweller would expect to find in his home. The farmhouse, like other old houses in this area, is made of flint, a very hard rock found locally in the chalk. Mr. Christian's farm machinery includes 3 ploughs, 3 tractors, a baler, a combine harvester, and a seed drill. Cattle are reared very successfully on the chalk, since farmers have improved the pasture and laid piped water supplies to the fields. Many farmers on the chalk lands now grow grain crops and rear cattle, so that they do not have to rely upon only one source of income. Mr. Christian allowed us to study his animals and to look at the way they are kept. As we walked through the fields, we observed the different breeds of cattle. We were told that farming methods are changing everywhere, so that more and more food can be produced at home. About 400 sheep are kept on the farm. There are 250 ewes, a few rams, and approximately 150 lambs, which are kept for fat stock and will, in due course, go to Winchester Market.
Well, we've seen a little of the school's work on the tertiary basin round Southampton, the chalk upland to the north. But what about that third area in the survey, the Isle of Wight? To get to the Isle of Wight from Southampton is quite an undertaking, and this time the film group are off on their own. The project involves a study of the functions and importance of Southampton as a port, and various forms of craft. This is the most recent, and the service is a great boon to commuters travelling to and from the island. Efficient transport and communications are vital to an island's economy, but this is perhaps a rather more costly method of travelling than most people at present can afford. It does, however, provide the school with an interesting way of including in the Hampshire Basin project something about recent scientific developments. Some of the boys who have recently left the school have found jobs in firms concerned with the development of various forms of hovercraft. And this trip for some of this group may possibly be the first introduction to a new kind of career. But the immediate objective is filming, and this proves anything but easy, in spite of the very helpful cooperation of the hovercraft officials. going to end this programme with a second extract from the school's film, the part we've just seen them shooting. But before we see that, let's hear what the headmaster, Mr. Williams, has to say about the value of rather specialised activities of this kind. Well, Mr. Williams, we've seen two kinds of study today, the geographical project on the Hampshire Basin and the film project about the geographical project. Does this kind of activity spill over into the rest of the curriculum?
Well, while the film unit is essentially part of the geographical project in the school, it does, of course, has also been used in other departments of the school and other projects. One undertaken, for instance, by the English department in a film based on the work of a modern poet entitled The Ballad of Billy Rose, about a broken-down boxer. It has also been used in the French department, physical education department, and also, as a point of interest, has been used by the special services which are provided by the local authority.
Mr. Carey is obviously a great enthusiast with his film unit. Do you feel the school as a whole gets any benefit out of this kind of activity, which, after all, is restricted to only a small group of boys?
Oh, I do indeed, yes. The films are certainly, they're permanent records of what we're doing in the school, both at home and abroad. They're of great interest to boys and parents, but they also provide useful comparison of material which has been used over a period of years in earlier films. They teach the boys who are making them to evaluate, to compare, to judge. But above all, I would say the greatest benefit of this film unit to the school is the fact that the films they are making are real teaching films, which are used regularly in our teaching of geography in the school, and so every boy in the school benefits from them.
And here's that other part of the boys' own film.
One of the most modern modes of transport is the hovercraft. Riding on a cushion of air, the hovercraft can skim across water or level land at great speeds. This way of getting about is beginning to be used a great deal in places where conventional methods of transport have been less successful. This craft conveys passengers between Southampton and the Isle of Wight, a 20-minute run each way. The ferry, used for the same purpose, takes an hour. Here is the Saunders Row factory at Cowes, birthplace of the hovercraft, where many different versions of this new method of transport, still in its infancy, have been developed. The hovercraft is a fast, efficient means of transport, which not only has reduced the time factor between the Isle of Wight and Southampton, but has already saved the lives of several dangerously ill people by transferring them from the island to receive specialised treatment on the mainland.